Welcome. We're in 47B, the second part of lesson 47, and the last part of lesson 47. We're going to talk about Arctan, but first I want to introduce you to what's called the unit circle chart. And for those of you in my Jupiter Ed class, you will have this as a PDF in your material section where you can just open it and print it, or you can copy it down in your notebook. So, what is this, you might ask? This is a reference chart of every reference triangle as it lives in each quadrant around the Cartesian coordinate system. We have quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And these little numbers out of the side, this is your cosine and your sine of each one. And if you need to get the tangent, which we will for our arctan, you just take the sine and put it over the cosine numerator. The numerator here, this is going to be your opposite side and your adjacent side. Let me give an illustration. Here is your reference triangle. This is 30 degrees, so this would be 30 degrees here, which means this is 60 and this is 90. Well, whenever we put in our reference triangle information, this is 1, this is 2, and this is the square root of 3, right? So you have the opposite over the hypotenuse. This is your sine. Adjacent over the hypotenuse. This is your cosine. And opposite over adjacent is your tangent. And that's just these two, sine over cosine, right? Sine over cosine, or opposite over adjacent. That's all you're doing. You can get your tangent of each one of these just by looking at these little coordinate things that you have here. And they're all cosine / sine. Is the order that they're written in this unit circle chart. And that's illustrated here by this reference triangle that I've drawn for us. So how do we use this in regards to our arctan? Well, we know that our arctan, the capital A, means that we are limiting ourselves to which quadrants we want to use the tangent reference for. And we do that because we want to limit it to just the positive tangent or the negative tangent. We want to keep ourselves from having to deal with all those over rotations and multiple rotations of the arc or of the angle. So we limit ourselves, and we limit it to the positive, which lives in quadrant 1, or the negative tangent, which is the most adjacent quadrant to the one that has the positive. So the other negative tangent lives in the third quadrant, but it's a cross, right? It's the opposite. It's all the way over here. It's so much easier if it's just right next door. It's just easier to deal with. So we limit our answers to being evaluated in the first quadrant or the second quadrant. The fourth quadrant here, the blue quadrant. So let's look at this problem right here. We're restricted, first of all, to first or fourth quadrant. So we look in the first or fourth quadrant for the tangent of 1 over the square root of 3. And this is positive. Well, that lives in the first quadrant. And it just happens to be the angle we already did, which was a 30-degree angle. So this arctan here, this all cancels out to be 30 degrees. So what we want is the sine of 30 degrees, and that is equal to 1 over 2. That's literally the answer. That's it. That's how you would solve one of these. It is not super hard. So let's look at another. Let's look at our first and only practice problem for 47B, and that is 47.3. And we're asked to evaluate the arctan of tan 135 degrees. So let's look at the tan of 135 degrees. Here's 135 degrees here. And the tan is going to be the square root of 2 over the negative square root of 2, because that's a little negative sign there, right? And the tan is the sine over the cosine numerator. So that is negative, so that would come up here and make a negative when we multiply both of these by -1. But then because it's the same number over the same number, it's going to be a -1. Right? That's what it reduces to. We have to find the tangent of the angle that is -1. And it's not going to live in the third quadrant. We can't use 135. It's not our answer. So we look over here, and because it's negative, it's going to live in the fourth quadrant. So the negative tangent that lives in the fourth quadrant that has a -1, or the tangent that lives in the fourth quadrant with a -1 is going to be 315, right? Because this has the same thing. Square root of 2, this is negative square root of 2 for this sign, and the cosine is positive. So that still is a -1. So this is the one we will use. Excuse me. And relative to the x-axis, this is actually a -45 degrees from the x-axis, because we don't want to use this over rotation. We want to use the one that is relative to the x-axis. So that's what we're doing. We are going to measure from the initial side and measure down when we go to the fourth quadrant and make it a -degree. So this would be the arctan of the tangent. Actually, I don't even have to rewrite that. I don't know why I'm rewriting that. The arctan of the tangent 135, of the tangent of 135 degrees, is going to be -45 degrees. That's it. We just had to do a little comparison shopping here. We found 135. We realized it couldn't live here. We looked at the tangent of 135, so it's -1. And then we looked in either the first or the fourth. We know that everything in the first is going to be positive. So we look in the fourth because that's where our negative tangent lives. And we find the degree angle that equals, the tangent equals -1. And that is just going to be your opposite angle from here. It just kind of flops over. And that becomes your -45 degree angle. 315 is the -45. It is the same angle. But we want to, when we write it out, we want to write it succinctly. Because it's a -1 here, we use the negative. And that's it. That is all we have for lesson 47. Do those practice problems, and I will see you in lesson 48.